I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the newly released book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the through Amazon. This morning we're meeting with Steve Saccone, author of Talking About God on Spirituality. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Rabbi. It's so good to be here. Honored to.
Well, we're very excited. Steve is a pioneer in the field of unrestricted education and leadership development. For more than a decade, he has partnered with churches nationwide as well as globally to design and launch innovative internship programs called Protege. His work in and with local churches has equipped many to develop transformational leaders and more effective leadership pipelines. He's written several books, including Relational Intelligence, Protege, the Protege Playbook, and this latest one, the one we'll talk about today, Talking About God, Honest Conversations About Spirituality. In his current role with Southeastern University, he's charged with executing a unique vision to merge the academic world with the local church to develop the next generation of ministry leaders. He also serves as professor and has been in pastoral ministry for over 15 years, where he served at Willow Creek Community Church in suburban Chicago, Mosaic Church in LA, and most recently Awakening Church in the heart of the Silicon Valley. Steve is passionate about leadership development, spiritual formation, the missional church, and transformational leadership. He has a master's degree in transformational leadership. He's also a Gallup certified strength performance coach and a certified facilitator of the Myers-Briggs and the DISC profile. Steve, quite an extensive curricular vitae, CV, that really speaks to your heart for transparency within ministry, transparency within the believer's life. What inspired you to embrace this entire concept of, yes, I'm saved, yes, I love the Lord, but I've got the same problems you do, I've got the same challenges you do, and I've got real life experiences that you do. We're really no different. It's just my response which is different, not my circumstances.
Yeah, all of us have had where something comes out about somebody that you know and perhaps you respect and admire, and something comes out that they're not who you thought they were. And I'm not talking about just little mistakes, right? I'm talking about something big, right? But it's an experience you had with someone who, at the end of the day, you conclude that they were more false. So I think that's part of it, sort of the negative side. The positive side is people in my life along the way that have been authentic and been transparent and shared their struggle. Because I think even as a leader myself, especially, you sort of think sometimes you got to put this image on, or you got to edit the imperfections that you have, and we're all tempted to do that in different ways for different reasons. But I've been inspired and drawn to these people along the way in life that have been what I would call mentors in authenticity, where they've shared, people that I admire, and I actually find myself admiring them more, and I find myself relating to them and drawn into that relationship. And in contrast, when people you feel are false or pretending or putting off certain image, and trust me, I've been guilty of that too, but I find myself more repelled by them. It's a strong word, but at times not drawn to them. And so it's sort of a mix of, I've seen it in the negative, I've seen it in the positive, and I've adopted the value deep down to live an authentic life. And that doesn't mean you go around sharing anything and everything all the time, but it means you be real, and you be authentic and transparent in appropriate ways. And I find that actually builds bridges in relationships, builds trust, builds credibility. And yeah, it's just a good way to live and relate to people.
You wrote this book with your wife, Sherry, or Cherie,
Yeah,
which
Sherry. Yeah.
Sherry, and you draw upon
some experiences that you two have shared in your life that became kind of a foundation for how you talk about God, how you communicate with others about God, how you communicate with each other about God. But I want to go back kind of to your roots, because you must have had some key influencers, some models of both the transparent that kind of knocked them right off the pedestal, that said, wow, the man behind who I thought,
Yeah.
the persona, isn't who I thought he was. And by the same token, there had to be those that were truly authentic all the way through. What they appeared to be, they actually were, and you were able to see that. Who were some of those people in your life?
Yeah, there's a guy named David who has been a longtime mentor of mine now, and he talks about this very idea of authenticity and just the importance of sharing his life with others. I think when you get the real picture, like somebody like Dave, who's been a mentor of mine, when I get the real picture of who he is, I mean, I would put him in the category of one of the most honorable men, and I would say godly men, a person who's more like Christ. You know, he's in my top five list, maybe top three of people that are most like Christ. And he's not perfect, and he'll tell you that. He's imperfect. He's got imperfections. And when I hear about his own struggle in life sometimes, I'm drawn to that. I want to know more. I'm intrigued by him. And it strips down that sort of invisible wall that can be up between you and another person. There's another lady, Cheryl, who's been a mentor of mine. And not only has she been authentic and been a model for me and for Sherry, she helped me along the way, especially early on in my young adult years in ministry, learning how do I access what's inside of me, right? Because sometimes I know for me, it's like it's even hard to access. Like, what is my emotion right now, or what is my struggle, and how do I talk about it? And how do I gain self-awareness? So she modeled it, but she also helped me kind of learn how to do it in a healthy and appropriate way. And that's been a journey. It doesn't happen in a night or a day, but yeah. And so I just practiced that over time. Sherry has done the same. Sherry's taught me so much about being authentic, and sometimes that means you say stuff that makes people a little uncomfortable even. And just learning to be okay with that, and embrace it. And I think when it comes to talking to other people about God or life, that's part of where the conversation goes. You learn to live in the tension and the unresolved things in life, and the uncertainty and the struggles and the pain, and you live in that with people. I don't think you can live in that with people unless you're living in that yourself. And I think that those are just two of many examples that I've seen who really do that well, and they've modeled it for me.
One of my early mentors kind of set the tone with me. Never let them see the man behind the rabbi. Keep them at arm's length. Don't develop relationships, because if you do, there's going to become this spirit of familiarity. And that spirit of familiarity, there's going to be a line that's going to be crossed, and they're going to assume that there is a personal relationship at a different level than there actually is when you are their leader, their spiritual, their rabbi, their pastor. And over the years, I've come to have to unravel that a lot. I built up a lot of walls in a congregation that I founded, built, grew, led, and realized that I had taken this approach because that's what I was taught. Listen, if you're sick, don't tell them you're in the hospital, because they'll consider that a weakness, and then somebody's going to want to step in. And there was this fear factor of always being on guard, always having up a veil, a mask, Everything had to be perfect. You were the model couple. You were the model everything. And this is something that's been carried through anybody who's been in the ministry for 30, 40, 25, 30, 40 years. That's kind of the message they grew up with, was that nobody out there, with 10,000 people out there, nobody's ever going to know the man behind the rabbi. They're never going to know any of that side. And yet, you're coming along with a message, as well as many other authors that we've had on the program, of transparency, that says that this generation, and I'll refer to the millennials, want to be relational and deep, want to have meaning, but part of that is technology does not mean relationship. Technology is connection, but it's not relationship. It's connection.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Right.
Walk me through your view of this transparency, and can we strike this false balance? Is there an oversharing? Is there that kind of comfort zone, that DMZ, if you will? There's this side of the minister, and then there's the person of the minister, and then there's this DMZ in between that you kind of hang out in, but you share a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about this. You talk about transparency.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in my belief, we were created for human connection, right? One person to another. We were created to have a connection with the God of the universe, our creator, as well. When you hide, and I've been there too, as you were just saying, you've been in it longer than me and have more experience, but I've been in that place too, where you basically feel like you need to hide stuff or edit stuff. Now, I think some editing, to use that word, is probably always appropriate, or at least in many cases, some degree of editing, I'll call it. It's like you don't just go share anything and everything with anybody, okay? But what I have found is the more I hide something from someone else, right, what that does is the opposite of building a bridge of human connection, right? There's often obstacles, right? And so when I'm with someone, whether as a pastor or just friend to friend even, if they sense that and see that, they're going to be much more apt to hide themselves, right? Mm-hmm. If they do view you as this sort of, esteemed human being or pastor, rabbi, whatever, right? I mean, sometimes they come and share stuff with you, I guess, but over time they're gonna go, I want to hide because he's so much better of a person than me, right? That's sort of the internal conversation. And I also ascribe to the idea of, you use the word weakness. None of us want to look weak, I guess, at a human level, right? We want to be strong and that sort of thing. And I get that, but at the same time, I've learned in life that being aware of my weaknesses and sharing them in appropriate ways not only helps me connect with other human beings, but even helps me connect to God. And I realize the truth of the matter is I am weak in some things. Now I can be strong in some things and weak in others. And we look at that as a bad thing. I don't always think that's a bad thing, right? I think we need to embrace that we are weak in certain ways. I think it fosters dependence on God, appropriate dependence on others, right? And we're supposed to live in that way. Now, to the technology thing, there's a lot of great things about technology. Of course, we wouldn't be here talking if that wasn't true. But I think one of the dynamics that I see happen is, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, pick a medium, and I'm guilty too here, but we project this image, right? And it's like, you ever had that experience where, man, my friend, everything's going right in their life. Well, I've known people and their Facebook looks like everything's amazing, but I know what they're going through in their real life, right, so to speak. And that's not always congruent. So, what I would tell, whether it's a millennial or Gen X or Generation Z or whatever, it's like, be careful with that, because when we live in that technology world and we're projecting a certain image, I think it can often foster the wrong kinds of stuff in us. And I'm not saying don't use technology, but I'm saying be careful with how you use it, and be wise and know that does affect how you relate to other people. And so when you do relate to other people, right, nothing can take the place of human connection. And if you want to have human connection, again, transparency, authenticity are huge parts of doing that with someone else. And I think we all long for that. I think it's just kind of sometimes hard to get there because everyone's sort of hiding stuff or not being real or whatever, and then we end up doing that too. But if we decide in our own heart, in our own life, I'm going to learn to be real. I'm going to learn to be honest. Now that doesn't mean I'm critical all the time of everything I see. It doesn't mean I share, deep dark secrets with anybody I bump into. But it does mean I'm real and I'm present to the moment, to the person, and in appropriate ways. I share truthfully what's going on in my life, truthfully what I think. And I see people all the time sharing stuff that they think people want to hear, but it's not really what they believe or think. And I don't think that's actually a healthy thing for a human being to do.
In your book, talking about God, you promote an honest but yet respectful way of talking about and almost refuting the myth that if you're a believer, you're given some extra perfection, you're given some extra favor, you're given some extra privileges with the kingdom of heaven from a standpoint of health, wealth, prosperity, immunity to everyday problems. And statistically, Christian homes have the same level of child abuse, same level of spouse abuse, same level of drug abuse, same level of profanity, same level of alcoholism, same level of pornography, same level of divorce. So we know that salvation, or our perception of what salvation is as it's being modeled today, isn't really a get out of jail free card at all.
Yeah.
In the presentation, in your discussion, how do you encourage people to talk about it without saying, what's the big deal? If your life is going to be just as messed up as mine, and you got to go to church and I don't, and you got to read your Bible and I don't, and you're having the same problems that I'm having, and you do all these other things, what's the value proposition?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so for me, I was an adult when I came to faith in Jesus. I began to follow him when I was in college, and there was a number of reasons that led me in my own life to that moment, to that decision, to that commitment. One of them, I was looking for purpose. I was looking for meaning in life. I wasn't finding it. Number two, I realized that I was relying on myself for kind of all the answers and to do life on my own. So when we're talking about a Christian, when there's a true, authentic friendship with God, which Jesus says, I don't call you simply servants, I call you friends in the New Testament. So he says, I want a friendship with you, right? When we engage in a friendship, right? And this isn't really a religion thing so much as it's a God and human connection thing through Jesus, right? Transformation is the hope, is the promise that we would, there's a big kind of Bible word sanctification, right? But it basically means that we're being transformed. Our life is changing. So in that authentic friendship with Jesus that I've engaged and know many others who have, I have found hope, I have found purpose, I have found meaning, I have found strength when I am weak. It happens often through prayer, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I'm in a conversation with someone maybe who doesn't believe the same things, it's like, okay, there was a lot of people and a lot of experiences and a lot of internal conversations in my own life that led me to make a decision to follow Jesus. What I believe Jesus does offer any human being is hope, is purpose, is meaning, is life, is eternal life, is abundant life, right? There's a whole list of things. And so, yes, it doesn't mean that we don't struggle. And I think that's the myth, right? That's the debunking myth that sort of is embedded throughout the book of like, no, I struggle too. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't made progress, but it means I can relate to where you're at. Man, you got struggles with, you know, your own world of sexuality, right? Or you got tough questions that you're asking about suffering and pain in the world. Why would God allow that? Or, pick a topic. I mean, those are two big ones, but right. It's like, man, I wrestle with some of that stuff too. I struggle with some of that stuff too. And I think in a word, I'll give you two words. It's humility in the way we relate to people, right? We're not better than, we're not self-righteous. We're not, ahead of you or more than you or better than you. And the second word I would say is dignity, right? That you express dignity to another human being. If you're humble and you show someone dignity, man, relational connections can happen, substantive, meaningful conversations can happen. You can talk about God and you can talk about just about anything else, and you don't have to agree on everything. And I think that's a very positive, beneficial thing to a human life and a friendship.
We're talking with Steve Saccone, author of Talking About God, Honest Conversations About Spirituality. If you've struggled with talking with others about your faith because you got problems, you have real situations in your life, and you feel that you're not empowered to share the gospel or your faith or really your relationship with God because you're just as fallible as the non-believer, I want to encourage you that this book will equip you to be able to talk comfortably, respectfully, with dignity, with other people about the real situation, because there is a difference. We may have the same problems, but we have a better chance of getting out of them because we have something to hold on to grab a hold of that's going to pull us through it, and we have a hope. And a hope is a future promise of something to come. And many of your friends are facing what they would consider to be hopeless situations, and you may be facing the exact same situation, but you have hope, and you owe it to them. You owe it to yourself to share openly your struggle, but your hope. And that's the missing piece and the missing ingredient. And that's what should make you more comfortable in being able to talk about the gospel. I encourage you, this book, Talking About God by Steve and Sherry Saccone, Honest Conversations About Spirituality. While we go on break, visit the books and media page at ignitinganation.com and click on Talking About God and order a copy for yourself. I know so many are uncomfortable about talking about it because they've got a son they got a problem with. They've got a relative they have a problem with. They have their own problem, and they don't want to come off as sanctimonious and as being perfect. We are perfect. We are perfectly imperfect. We are designed to be perfectly imperfect so that we never arrive. Only one has arrived. And when we finally come to that realization that the truth of our circumstances is what's going to motivate other people, that if my attitude about my circumstances, I'm not in despair, I'm not in hopelessness, I have a hope and I have something to hold on to, this is going to give you the tools you need and the words to say to be able to convey that message to that person that you go to work with, that you sit with, that you watch suffer every day with hopelessness. You have a message, even if you're going through the exact same struggle. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation about Talking About God with Steve Saccone. Back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the books and media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Steve Saccone, author of Talking About God, Honest Conversations About Spirituality. This discussion that we're having, Steve, and I welcome you back to the program, is about transparency. You're right, we're often conflicted about sharing our personal struggles and doubts with others, especially with people who believe differently. We fear it could send a message that Christ isn't really who he said he was, and that faith doesn't really work in real life. And that's a real question, a real challenge as to how we frame the struggle and how we frame that our circumstances are no different. There is a Bible-believing Christian's circumstances in life are absolutely no different whatsoever than a Buddhist, Taoist, a Muslim, a Jew. No different. Life is life, equally applied driven by the evil that's in the world. So, in this idea of talking about God, and really almost the title becomes added to how to talk about God. How do you guide us and lead us to frame that proposition that yes, I struggle, yes, I do, but?
Yeah, Sherry and I, of course, we wrote this book together, and we're married, and one of our sons has autism. And there are immense challenges. He's 7 years old now, and there are immense challenges that come with that. There's a degree of suffering and just trial and struggle and in the journey of that, right, the last 5 years in particular, through the struggle, sometimes we've asked ourselves the question, how would people go through this, or who do they turn to, right, if they don't have God, or even in a marriage where one person believes in God and one person doesn't, like how does that work, right? And there's a real challenge there, well, because you have a different worldview. And so I think when it comes to engaging with people, when you're talking about God, when we talk about our own struggles in relation to our son in particular, for example, and we talk about how God has grown our faith and how we've been stretched and challenged. It's been hard, but man, we've learned to trust in God. We've become deeper and we believe better human beings, right? But it's not just because we did it on our own. It's because, man, God has met us and we've sensed him in that, and he's brought us hope. My wife Sherry is currently writing a book called Heavy with Hope, and it's about her journey of loss and suffering of the family we thought we were going to have, and the different things that change that are not ideal, right, in a sense. And so when you talk to somebody about that, and when we have, and you share how God met you in that, and then they begin to, not only their heart connects to you, but they begin to think of their own trials and struggles and challenges in life. And often they start to ask, well, man, how do I go through that? If they don't believe in God, right, they rely on their self, mostly, or some other addiction or some other, thing that they cling to, which we all know doesn't lead us to the right path. And so I think it's just like when you talk about God and you're humble and choose to engage in a more open fashion, and then, yeah, God comes into the picture because he's part of our own worldview. People are interested, not every person, but it's like there are people out there that are searching for hope and meaning and purpose and God and someone to turn to in their struggle, that they've tried it their own way. It's not working. It's not working. It's not working. So we're not saying our life isn't working, right? We're saying when we're in the struggles and trials and challenges of life, right? We have someone to turn to give us strength and hope and that's the message we're trying to pass on to other people. We're not trying to force it on them. We're not trying to even convert them per se. We're just saying, this is where God has met us. I think God loves you and cares about you, and there's hope for you. And through a series of question asking and listening and validating where they're at and just dialoguing, right? Because sometimes faith sharing is a monologue, if we're honest, right? It's me sharing what I think they should believe, yada, yada. And it's like, well, I think there's many more nuances to that. Do I believe in the gospel? Do I believe in Jesus? Do I believe he is our hope? Absolutely. But it's like, this is a friendship. This is a human being. I got to respect their free will, their own journey. And I want to come alongside them and have a friendship that shows them dignity, doesn't force anything upon them, but also invites them into what I believe is offered to them. And that's a friendship with God, the God who created them, the God who loves them, the God who wants to be connected to them. And so that's the conversation, and that's the story of this book. It's 6 of our friends in narrative style and how we interacted with them, how we listened to them, how we shared, how we asked them questions, how we showed them dignity and love, et cetera, et cetera.
Steve, recently I had a conversation with someone who's not a believer. And they said, I'd love to be friends with you, but if you're going to talk to me about faith and about Jesus and all this other stuff, you know what? I'd rather not. And here was my answer to them. I said, it's not my purpose to get to know you or develop a friendship with you for the purpose of convincing you that Jesus was the Messiah and for you to come to faith. However, my conduct should provoke you at some point during our relationship as friends for you to ask me the question, you know, I've watched you now through this circumstance and this circumstance and this circumstance, and I noticed something different. What is that difference?
Yeah.
Are we lacking in acting like believers, and is that part of the barrier to having these conversations? Because, look, I stand in the line in Walmart with somebody that I might recognize, and I see them 3 rows over, and I might recognize them from a church I preached at last Sunday, and they are ripping into somebody, just tearing them either about their kid grabbing candy or screaming or telling them, you need to spank that kid more, and they go off on them, and I'm thinking to myself, wow.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a profoundly and deeply challenging idea. I think for anyone in this context, I'll say for anyone who is a follower of Jesus, a Christian, they call themselves a Christian, man, the first thing you need to look at is, are you connecting with God, and are you becoming the right kind of person? Because there are some, speaking frankly and transparently here, there are some Christians, at least in name, that I go, I don't want you revealing that you're a Christian, because the way that you live or act is going to be a negative, right? Now, God is bigger than us and our own, lack of living the right way, and no one's ever going to live perfectly, of course. But man, as a follower of Jesus, what He invites us into is a way of living that is life-changing, that is different. As you were saying, your conduct ought to be different. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, goodness, those things should be like oozing out of your life if you're connecting with God in the right kind of way. And the unfortunate thing in what's embedded in what you're saying is not all Christians live that way. So they're a Christian in name, but it's like, are they really connecting to the vine, as Jesus calls it, right? Where the fruit is born through the vine, right? It's not about us mustering up enough strength in that moment to stay calm around our kids. I mean, yes, we need self-control, but God is the one who, over time and through relationship and connecting to the vine, He's the one that bears the fruit of self-control in your life. He's the powerful one. It's the Spirit at work. So then He says we're witnesses, right? We're witness to our experiences of God. So much of a lot of what happens in the book, as we recount, is us sharing how we've experienced God. I'm not talking about weird God experiences. I mean, sometimes we have those, but those can get weird really quick in conversations. I'm just talking about where God has met you in sort of the everyday things, where you sense Him, where you see Him. I believe eternity is embedded in all of our hearts. The Bible says we're to be ambassadors for Christ, right? We're to be an aroma to those around us who are saved and not saved, right? In 2 Corinthians, I think it is. And so, yeah, what's the aroma of our life, right? What kind of witness are we? What kind of ambassador are we? Jesus said, just as the Father sent me, I am sending you. So we are the sent ones. We have a mission. But man, before we share how, this gospel has changed our life, it better have changed our life, right? And I think that's the challenge, right? Are we living well? Jesus said, may your good deeds shine, right, to the world around you, right, and bring glory to me, right? And so, yeah, people should see our good deeds. We should be the most generous people around. We should be compassionate. We should be seeking and extending justice. We should be kind and respectful. And that's the kind of stuff that, man, I'm drawn to that. I know myself when someone else is that. I mean, I have a couple of friends I'm thinking of now. They're the most generous 2 people I've ever met. And I'm not that generous. I want to be. They inspire me. I want to know what's behind their generosity. And I think that's all kind of part of it. We can't guarantee that someone will ask us about our faith or our life. That's on them. But we can live the right way. That's on us. And we can foster spiritual conversation. And we can ask questions about what's working, what's not, what does someone believe. And I think that's a huge missing piece of this whole conversation, that we ought to be not just answer givers, but question askers. And then we ought to listen and be fully present with people and really be in it, with them, because what will emerge when you're really in it with them are all kinds of significant conversations. Sometimes it just stays at the philosophical level. I got people in my life that are very anti-Christian, right? And they just want to attack it philosophically, intellectually, etc. And some of those people are a lot smarter than me, but I cling to an authentic faith that is very real to me, and I can share my experience and story, and they really can't argue with that because this is my story. And so I try not to argue in that kind of way and more get into what's happening in your life personally. Because often people's intellectual questions are related to what they believe or don't believe about the character of God.
In this politically correct world of self-identification, and everybody has their right to their own opinion, and the minute you begin to inflict, impose, oppress, offend, you get this response. How do you, first of all, there's now a reluctance.
Yes.
I'm afraid that I'm going to offend somebody, and they might embarrass me. They might blow up in my face. I'm sitting there at Starbucks, and I want to have this conversation with them, and I bring it up, and they just flip out in their this new self-identification world that we live in. How do we overcome that reluctance to start out with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important part of this conversation, and one is to just name it in yourself. Like I'll say it for me. It's like I have missed many moments of conversations or sharing that I just had fear, and fear won. I've had many moments where I've approached a person in a conversation and I've said the wrong thing or done it in the wrong way or been arrogant or self-righteous with it. And you hope to learn from those things and not make those mistakes again. I mean, there's been a couple people in my life I've said things and they never want to talk to me about God and in some ways about anything else because I said something that was hurtful or offensive or whatever. Now, I don't believe that we should not I don't believe we should avoid saying offensive things. Like that's not the point. In fact, we ought to be bold at times, right? But also humble. We ought to be confident, but also meek. But I do think there's appropriate ways to go about that. I think you can have disagreements and show people dignity. I think that's part of the problem in our culture, quite honestly. It's like people are just like ranting. They just want to rant and just like throw stuff at you or throw it out on social media or, vent about something. And I would say, well, yeah, those aren't really productive in most cases, right? Almost all cases. But if you can engage a dialogue, yes, you can disagree. I mean, I wonder if we disagreed with people but showed each other dignity and love. I mean, what would happen in our culture, in our day? People that believe different things, religion to religion, in politics, whatever. And we just that's just not a value. So I mean, where that really starts is to the individual. Begin to engage in ways that, part of it is finding common ground because there's almost always some common ground, and where there's points of disagreement. Hey, let's just talk about this in a way that we can show each other respect and naming that in a relationship or a friendship. There's been times more recently I've kind of learned from my own mistakes where I just go, hey, look, this is getting like intense, and you're at a coffee shop or maybe you're just at your home or their home, and you go, I mean, we can talk about this, but I don't want to like get into an argue match. Let's just talk about it in a reasonable way. I know it's emotional. I know it's deep beliefs and values, and that's harder to do. But I think you just sometimes have to acknowledge it, name it, and then go about it yourself in the right way, and not get lured into the verbal back and forth yelling, argumentative kind of thing that sometimes it becomes. We got to practice self-control and self-discipline on that.
So you have to really be aware. You've been talking to this person for a while and you've reached kind of an impasse. You have to be aware and sensitive enough when to back off and say, you know what, if I push this too far, I'm going to lose any opportunity in the future to ever reach this person because I'm the obstacle. It's my message. I spent 44 years in the traditional synagogue, and people used to Christian speak to me, and I didn't understand a word they said. It was like they were talking a foreign language to me. And I didn't acknowledge it because I didn't understand. I had no idea what they were saying. Things like Jesus saves. I'm thinking to myself, well, if he's a Jewish guy, he invests.
That's right.
All right. Why would I want to get just a small percentage? All right. And if he invests, then does he have any good stock tips? I'm not interested in this.
Right.
Well, you're a sinner and you're going to die and go to hell. I didn't murder anybody.
Right.
Who are you to tell me what I am and where I'm going? Last time I checked, 90% of the book is about me. All right? It is not about you. 90% of the book is about Israel. It's not about Rome. So I don't exactly know what you're coming to talk to me about, but in your language, you're pushing me away saying, I don't want to talk to you. I don't understand you. You don't relate to me because you know nothing about me. And if you don't know anything about me, you don't know anything about Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, there's these two words that I kind of live in between, or live in the tension of: invading and inviting. And the truth of the matter is, people don't want their sort of sacred space to be invaded, right? But when we invite people into a conversation, when we're inviting in our approach, I mean, it's sort of a goofy example, but if you went to the mall and someone came up to you and started kind of yelling at you and said, "Give me 50 push-ups," and started coaching you through it, of course, everyone would resist that and hate that, right? If you went to a gym and hired a trainer, you're inviting them to actually do that and coach you and say, all right, 50 push-ups, right? And there's a huge difference. And so in spiritual conversations, right, it's like we got to be careful we don't try to force things on people. That's not on us, right? What the Bible calls us to do is to come alongside people and be a witness, to dialogue with them, to show them love and dignity, right? And we get too agenda driven rather than person driven. It's like, okay, what's this person going through? Same thing in learning, like anyone would tell you that there's anything about learning, you learn best when you're already asking a question about something you're curious to learn, right? If someone tries to teach you something, you're really like, hey, I don't really care about that. It doesn't absorb, right? When you've been asking that question for 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, your absorption factor is way up, right? You're just like, oh man, oh, this makes sense. Oh, this is connecting. And so I think our approach ought to be, hey, where is this person at? What questions are they asking? What are their struggles? What are they kind of searching for? And if they're not on any of those fronts, tread carefully, right? Colossians 4 says, be wise in the way you act toward outsiders, make the most of every opportunity, and may your conversation be seasoned with salt and full of grace, right? Man, if we could live that out, how much better would our conversations be?
It's interesting that you brought up, I think, the absolute key, and that is creating an environment where people can ask questions, or you can ask probative questions to assess where somebody is. People say to me all the time, how do I reach, I have a Jewish neighbor, I want to bring them to church. And I say, forget it. They don't want to go to your church. Okay?
Yeah.
They're not interested in your church. They're not interested in your Jesus. He's the God of the Gentiles. We got 2,000 years of history of people violating Romans 11:22, which God says, I'll continue in my kindness to the Gentiles, provided you continue in your kindness to the Jews. So, listen, enough with inviting us to church. However, asking them the question, hey, do you go to synagogue on Friday night? How do you celebrate the Sabbath? Wow, you celebrate the Passover. We look at that as the Lord's Supper. I only know it from a picture I've seen painted on a wall where they're serving a loaf of bread and a big baked lobster. Do you have one of those in your home? I'd love to have an authentic experience, and you relate at their level by wanting to experience what they have experienced. So then you open the door to saying, well, you know what? You were kind enough to come to synagogue with me, and You know, you've been asking me, sure, now that you've shown yourself friendly, now you've shown yourself to be not an agenda of proselytizing or evangelizing, but you're looking for a relationship and you want to understand better what I think, what I understand, what I know, what I don't know, so that you're able to
Well, that's
relate.
That's exactly right. That's how friendships work, right? So you care for one another. You sometimes you do things that I'm not really that interested, but my friend likes it, so I'll go do it, right? And vice versa. Anytime a friendship gets one-sided, usually the other person who's on the other side doesn't want to be in friendship much anymore, or at least not in an enjoyable way. You know, this is fascinating to me. So I did a study of the Gospels at one point. And I studied the questions Jesus asked. Right, Jesus, Son of God. Right, he's got all the knowledge he needs. He's not asking questions to really get answers. And here's how it went. Here's one little excerpt from it. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus asks 87 questions. In the Gospel of Luke, right, these are the biographies of Jesus at the beginning of the New Testament.
Right.
Gospel of Luke, he asks 129 questions. Now, if you look at all of the Gospels, Jesus gets asked by others at least 183 questions. And you know how he responds? 307 more questions, right? Very few direct answers, as we would say. And he often asked people a question and walked away, right? Not like turned his back, walked away, but like gave them a question to think about and didn't close the deal, so to speak. And I think that's part of it too, right? We're just like, we're question askers. We're intentional. When you ask a question and you listen, people translate that as being loved, right? When we listen to someone, people translate that as being loved. And people want to be loved. All of us do. Me too. And when someone listens to me well and asks me questions and cares about what's in my world and what I'm going through, man, I'm drawn to that. And that's how friendships ought to work.
You're exactly right. And that's exactly what we're looking to do, foster friendships, relationships, and then we're looking to build the kingdom with people that we relate to. We're talking with Steve Saccone, author of Talking About God, honest conversations about spirituality, how to overcome some of the limitations, some of the hang-ups, some of the struggles that we all have, and how to talk about God. Steve, thank you so much for sharing your story with us here on Revealing the Truth. We wish you and Sherry great success, and when Sherry gets that book done, you let us know, and we'll have her on to talk about that book.
That sounds great. Thanks so much. It's been an honor to be with you.
Thank you. God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.